Toy fans, Aaron here. Today taking a look at Wicket and Logray that was released on the Power of the Force freeze frame line back in 1998. Quick look at him on the card. Things looking pretty nice. I mean, it's the green card back of the Power of the Force 2 line. And as I mentioned, you're going to have that freeze frame off to the left side. As for the image there, it's Logray getting the limelight. Off on the right side, you do see your two included figures through that blister. Here's how the back side looks. Top half is going to show you the same image that you're getting on the freeze frame slide. Very brief description about the scene underneath that photo. Just a little bit farther down, you're going to get two figures or two beast assortments that were available around the same time. And then off to the right, another handful of figures that were also available. And for this line, you did have a special offer. Well, you had two special offers available, but the one being featured here is sending off for that freeze frame action slide holder. And now taking a look at the figures out of the packaging. First up, I guess what I would say is I feel like both the figures as a whole are a little bit too tall. I'm going to throw Leia into the mix here so you can get an idea of scaling. And while Logray, I feel like he's pretty close, maybe just a smidge too tall. Wicket is definitely much bigger of a figure than he should be. Now, both of these figures did get re-released in the Vintage Collection line, and I think the scaling problems were fixed within that line. Going in, focusing on these figures now one at a time and starting with Logray. Overall, I really like this figure. And for the most part, I actually like it better than what was received when they redid the figure for the Vintage line. I say that mainly because I like the paint job that they did for the fur much better on this figure than they did on that newer one. I'll put a link in the description. You can watch that review. But I think overall, even though this figure was done in '98, there's still a lot to like about it. Looking in on the head sculpt, and well, first actually, this little headdress wrap thing that he has on is separately sculpted, and you can remove that if you want. Just kind of peel it off over his ears. And a fair amount of detailing being done to the sculpt. Little skull on the top of his head is looking pretty nice. Okay weathering being applied. Little orange coloring to it. Otherwise, not a lot special happening there. As it rolls around to the backside, you're going to see your feather detailing sticking out onto the top and along the backside. And I think they did a pretty nice job getting those little intricate feathers sculpted in there. It lays nicely around the shoulders and along the back. As far as the sculpting of the face, things still looking pretty good. Great fur sculpt, and that actually goes for the entire body. I think they really did a nice job getting the little tufts of fur sculpted in there. And within the face itself, you can definitely see the way it lays across the face, kind of going away from the nose, the mouth, and out towards the sides of the head. Nothing really crazy for the eye painting, just a little blob of brown. Same for the nose and same for the lips, but still things are looking pretty good. And then going for the rest of the figure, as I already mentioned, it's basically just a lot of fur sculpting and stripes of white and brown paint. Colors look great. And even though it could be considered an accessory, I'm leaving it on anyways because it kind of completes his outfit, if you will. Little satchel off to his right side. Really nice sculpting to that. Lots of feathers once again. And you got various other pieces hanging off the side of this thing. There's no functionality to it. It's all there just for looks. And at the tips of the hands and feet is where you're going to find your nail painting just to kind of highlight those features out a little bit on the figure. As far as articulation, that head is going to rotate all the way around. You only get your swivel at the shoulders, and you do get your swiveling at the legs. And final accessory comes with is this little staff. Get some decent sculpting and detailing going on. Really, they still managed to capture the little veins of the feather pretty well in this piece. But I like the use of colors, giving you a darker red feather on the top. You got the white for, I think, what was probably some bone pieces or something making up the top of his staff. And then you got the wooden handle. I'm not all that crazy about the orange weathering here also. Pretty thick and just kind of but again, this figure was done in '98, and that's pretty much par for the course. And now moving on to Wicket, where yes, as I already mentioned, he's a little bit too big, too tall. I mean, still for the most part, he's very identifiable as being Wicket. As for that wrap running around his head, pretty decent sculpting to it. There is a slight subtle wash being done in there. Hopefully that's coming through on the camera. But overall, I do feel like the coloring to this is a little off. As you can see, it's more of a tan. In the movie, it seemed more like a reddish orange brown. Certainly not a deal breaker on this figure, and that is something that they did adjust when they re-released the figure later in the Vintage Collection. The stitching detailing through the sides and along the top between the ears, and plus you have an added touch of stitching just above the eyes, all makes for some very nice detailing being done. Overall though, this little wrap does fit very nice and snug around the head. Lays nicely over the shoulders, along the front and along the back of the figure. Do like the little ears sticking out on the top. Sculpting for the face looks great. I like the little thickness of the fur coming out around the cheeks. Very nice white painting. And you're still managing to get some of that brown around the eyes and around there for the lips on the mouth. I like the little painting of the white teeth in there. And the black eyes certainly look nice. As far as the rest of that figure, same thing as Logray. I mean, he's all fur. There's not much to say about it, except I will say that I feel like overall, he's a pretty beefy figure. Now, whereas Logray looked like a pretty normal looking Ewok, and I say that because the Power of the Force line, when it launched in '95, was very much known for having overly beefed up figures. I didn't feel like Logray suffered from that, but Wicket definitely looks like he's been taking his steroids. Otherwise, though, that fur sculpting's still looking really good. You can definitely see a lot of tufts of fur, some different layering in there. Overall, he's got a nice brown color to the figure. And they did a pretty nice job of that white painting in the center of the chest. As you get to the tips of the fingers and on the toes for this figure, you got a nice light tan color painted in there. As far as articulation, with that wrap on and the way it sits over the back and on the front, you're only going to get some side-to-side movement on the head, but I think you're going to get what you want, and that's realistic. Both of the arms do swivel all the way around, and then you also get your rotation for the legs. As far as accessories, it comes with a single staff. Certainly looks like what we saw him carrying around in the movie. You get some decent wood grain texture being sculpted in for the handle, and then at the tip, some nice silver painting for that little rock spear that's supposed to be at the end. Overall, I'd say it's somewhat generic looking, but I think it does the job for how it needs to look. And Wicket can hold this staff in either hand. And so overall for me, these are a couple of great figures. I mean, you got 2 figures on 1 card, which was pretty nice to get. And I think overall the look of them holds up pretty well today. Maybe a little bit less so for Wicket since he does have that beefier look to him. As I mentioned, both of these figures did get re-released in the Vintage Collection line much later, so these figures have already received a refreshed look. But I still think for the time frame that these were released in, they absolutely look great, and I'm glad that over the years of the Star Wars line that we've gotten other Ewok figures to place on the shelf. And so that wraps this one up. Definitely let me know what your thoughts are on these figures in the comment section below, and as always, thanks for watching.